All right, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Kevin Davidson. I'm welcoming you today to a very, very important discussion that we've organised through the Clan of Brothers Facebook group, and I hope that you're able to join us. We're going to be talking about aging without children. This is something that is going to grow. The impact is going to double over the next 30 years. In the UK, there's 1.2 million by 2030 men 65 plus that will be without children and aging. In the US, there's 8 million by that year, and it's predicted that will double by 2050. And what we will be looking at is sharing our stories, because this is something that not only has practical concerns, such as maybe like financial planning and power of attorney, but also we're going to look at the personal concerns people might have, such as isolation, depression, and loneliness is one of the things as well. So I have with me today my colleagues from the Clan of Brothers, which I'll now, if I just go around, you want to introduce yourself, and then we can start by sharing each other's stories. So I'll begin with Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Hadley. I'm in Manchester in the UK. I'm a doctor of social gerontology. I've looked at particularly involuntary childless men as they age, and I am a mediated and involuntary childless man. I was desperate to be a dad, particularly in my 30s, and didn't become one for a variety of reasons. Partner choice, timing of relationships, that sort of thing. And now 62, and sort of trying to negotiate that transition from working and retirement over an extended period. It's difficult because of the state pension. They keep changing the age when that kicks in, and work's difficult to find. So I'm doing bits of jobs here and there. And in my research, the guys were very affected by the thought of how later life was going to be for them. And in the UK, it's very confusing about care in later life and who's going to do that, who's going to pay for it, what your resources are. So the NHS and the care system on the outside looks really good, but once you, particularly when you're older and you try to access it, even if you have got family support, it's terribly confusing. It's very regional, down to almost specific, very small areas about what is and isn't available. And it is a concern for me. My wife's older than me, and we have a little joke, but there's a seriousness about it of who's going to go first and what's going to happen to the person who's left behind and who's going to care for them. And this is very much an issue of how that is going to happen. And some of the guys I spoke to were very concerned about that, particularly with the reports that tend to get highlighted about poor care in later life and abuse in care homes and stuff like that. And one of the big things about that is, it seems to me, from my observation, is it's the children of people in those institutions that flag up the issue. And if you don't have children, who's going to do that for you? And care in the UK is absolutely reliant on adult children mitigating your access, advocating for you. And it's there in policy, it's written down. But who isn't there are the childless. So that invisibility is at many levels, and that isolation is at many levels. You may feel isolated in yourself, but also there's an isolation that's structured as well. So I'll pass on to the next person now.
Okay, thank you, Robin. We'll definitely come back to some of the points you've spoken about. So I'll go to Russ Pater.
Yeah, good day. My name's Russ Pater. Live in Melbourne, Australia. 52 years old. My journey as a childless man started at the age of 28. My wife and I attempted to have kids and couldn't, and ended up in going down the assisted reproductive technology route with IVF. And we were found to have both male and female factor infertility. And went through about 7 years of IVF, which, as most of you would know, is a wonderful roller coaster. We looked at where we go from there. Do we actually go down the route of adoption? And it's different in every country, I know, but local adoption in Australia is more permanent foster care. There's not much in the way of genuine adoption, and to go overseas was just far too expensive. Once we looked into it, we looked at South Korea was our final choice, and it was going to cost pushing $40,000 just for the initial phase of going with that. And so you sort of you reach a conclusion where you think, okay, I'm going to be childless, and it's not really a choice. It's the only choice you have is to stop treatment or to stop looking. From our point of view, anyway. And then, it's got to the point now where, my wife and I, we're separated at the moment. But our wills really the only great feature in our wills is each other. It's where we go from there and what we do. I mean, to be honest, once I'm gone, I don't really care where my stuff goes. It's mostly dead anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it's an interesting topic to try and think. Yeah, and as Robin said, who's gonna care for us? Who's gonna be that support, amongst other things. So it's something which is very current, I think, but regrettably still stigmatized. And still something we don't discuss. We don't have it included in normal conversation. And I'll pass on to the next.
Okay, thanks, Russ. I'm going to pass to Scumbuzo. Hello, Scumbuzo.
Thank you very much. You said it right. I'm Scumbuzo. Yes, I am a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, and part of the work that I do is ministry to the hospital, where I am a chaplain, a healthcare chaplain, and I provide care there. Married in 2009, December 22, 12/15. That's when we were joined as husband and wife. So the pastor declared at that time, and this has been our journey to this time, and we don't have children, just like we are here in this platform, belonging to the clan of brothers, and we have been trying to have children, but because of medical challenges that my wife has been facing, we have failed to have children. And the third surgery that my wife had, I almost lost her life. That is when it dawned to me that I may be pursuing a dream that could cost the life of my wife. And then we decided to abandon this search for having children. This is the moment when there was this bling moment when I said, now I think I should step out into the world and tell somebody that you can still do it even if you don't have a child. So this is our 11th year, 22nd of December 2021. We'll be celebrating our 12th anniversary. From an African setting, when a child is not born, this is not something that you can just look down upon. It's something that is looked at with scorn and ridicule, and even receiving some unkind comments, adding insult to injury. I'm a religious person, and since you're a religious person, they'll be saying, "Oh, so what about the God that you prescribe to?" And I'm a religious leader. That makes it even worse. The culture also and the religion coming together, that makes this thing very complicated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kumbuzo. And we've got Michael.
Hi everyone. Great to see you, School, because it's been a while since we've chatted, and hopefully my internet stays okay. It's driving me insane. But I'm Michael Hughes, and I'm one half of a childless marriage, and my story is very similar to Russell's. I'm 1/3 of a podcast that we do deep dives into the childless experience. And right now, this subject is very passionate. I'm very passionate about, because I and my family, my extended family, are caring for my aging parents. So I've got that lived experience is quite raw right now. So over to you, Kev.
Okay. Well, what we've got, I've just written down some notes here because, I mean, okay, I can say my story. I'm a childless man. I'm 52. I've had 2 IVF treatments that were unsuccessful. I went through 15 years of real sense of loss, lost 2 jobs, my marriage ended, my health was bad. And I just felt very, very lacking. I just felt like I'd let a lot of people down. That was the biggest thing. In a previous talk, we talked about legacy. Male or manliness in my father's side is very, very apparent. I'm the 5th generation of men in my dad's side. So I just felt a huge pressure there on that side. And thankfully, it's something I've been able to speak to my dad about. And he's reassured me because he said to me, the most important thing to me, son, is your health and that you're happy. That is what I'm concerned about. And what I didn't know is that my grandfather died when he was 21, before his 21st birthday. And my dad never really spoke about this, but my dad had diabetes type 1. And he had to give him his injection for 2 years, and he was bedridden, apparently. He hardly left his bed for 2 years. And my dad said he didn't know if the next day he wasn't going to see his dad. So that's where I can see now that he says, my health, my happiness is more important than the legacy. But the most difficult thing is that I didn't want to have that conversation with my dad because I was too ashamed. I was worried that he would not think good of me. And some of the things we talked about today, and one of the things that this has got me thinking, because I never really, I used to think about this more when I was younger, but I'm in a relationship now, and I suppose happiness, not thinking that way. But for me, it's like, who does care? Robin said it, Russ said it. Who does care for me? That is the thing that does worry me, and I think that's probably worrying a lot of people. We said about primary care, and children do play a not just financially, but just morally, to have your family there. You know, it's just reassuring. So who takes their place? And that's the biggest concern. And can you trust that person? We talked about wills. Who do I give my power of attorney to if I'm not of sound mind? I know some kids are probably not as trustworthy either, but you know, there's that concern with this. So there's a lot of things actually we've spoken about so far. But if I just, one of the things that I want to go back to is about the cultural side, because that can impact on us. And Scambozo, you said about scorn and this sense of ignorance that you're lacking. What sort of impact does that have on a person in his life?
See, there is a sense of being reduced to something less important when you are scorned because you have failed in their own sense. They think you have failed to continue to perpetuate the family lineage. You have failed also in connecting, because in my culture, the children are a bridge between the dead and the living. That's in my culture. So when they are not born, you have broken that bridge. So the dead and the living cannot really communicate. They are not interlinked because you have broken that bridge. Children are not there, and you are the individual that is blamed because of that. And so it takes out the sense of being a real man. It takes out the sense of being a real husband. So it takes a righteous rebellion. There's a term that I coined, and I called it righteous rebellion. It takes righteous rebellion to then look at yourself as an individual that is normal and complete, even if you don't have children.
So there's an element. So I hear that there's shame that people are trying to imply by not having children.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was actually I saw a survey. It was an Australian survey about feeling masculine and being manly, and family and father seemed to be the key words that were in the survey that young people related to masculinity. So yeah, that really, if you're like us, that can really hit you like a spear, can it? Thinking when people believe that from this.
Maybe just to come in there, Kevin. Sorry, just to interject.
That's right.
Today, I went to church, and I visited a congregation that I had pastored about 10 years ago. Right, it should be 10 years ago, 11 rather. Yes, 11 years ago. So I met this old man, and this old man says, "So how many children do you have now since you're married?" I said, "No, I don't have any children." And then the old man laughed, that kind of laughter. He laughed out loud. This happened today. And I was thinking about this. And then he turned to the other man and said, this guy is a coward. In English, it's lighter. It's lighter. But in my own language, when you tell somebody that they are a coward, you are saying, this is a small boy that cannot be able to do anything at all. It's the greatest of insults.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's I don't even know where to go with that sort of input. I mean, I'm sorry you had to go through this. That is terrible. And even though it's a cultural thing, it doesn't make it any more functional or correct.
Right.
The worst I have to go through is, and my parents and my wife's parents were relatively good about it, but it was that underlying feeling that we haven't provided grandchildren, we haven't given that connection, and we've always felt second class in that regard. But in the continuum of impact compared to what you've been through, it's relatively minor. Although I think it would be a very common thing for people to feel when you go to the family gatherings and all the nieces and nephews, from our point of view, or the parents' grandkids and great grandkids now, are there in a group and everyone's talking about that, then you sort of sit on the outer going, look at that. Nothing. I've got nothing for you. It's a challenging thing, and of course, when you put this on top of it now, as we age, and I was expecting to see my children become, leave uni by now or do whatever they're doing, moving on with their lives, having kids of their own. And now you think, okay, so that's not happening. Where do I fit in this social picture, in this expectation of society? And how do I address that? And of course, one of the ways of doing it is a group like this, the Clan of Brothers. But yeah, in society in general, this is not talked about. This is not something that we address. Part of that is stigma, but part of that is also just ignorance, lack of awareness that we exist, that we are part of this community, and not a small part either. We're not insignificant. We're actually a fairly big minority. I think the more we talk about, and certainly, Michael, what you're doing with the Diversity Council is a great step, and I'm actually in contact with the diversity people from where I work to have a chat about this and see if we can make it part of the conversation in normalising our situation. But getting back to what you've shared with us, Scum, that's thank you for sharing that, and that would be a very, very painful experience. I honestly cannot imagine going through that.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, appreciate it.
I was just thinking that thinking about how I used to act in the past, like Russ was saying, with I'm from a large family, so there's always family get-togethers. I've got 16 first cousins, so we've got a lot of people. A lot of my cousins have got families now, and I used to turn up to family get-togethers in a very apologetic manner. I used to kind of just sneak in and not be seen, and that I look back and think, that's me. I'm actually carrying that shame. I'm the one that's feeling this. Now I see it as if I'm free, I will go to family get-togethers. If I'm not, then I say, look, I can't make it because I've got more time than you have. But if I do go there, I don't apologize. I meet their kids that are now older. There's some of them have got married, some have got kids, and I accept it for what they are, and I engage them this way as well. And I think it's important to call people out as well. I didn't used to do it in the past. I do it now. If I do get a snide comment, I pick it up straight away and ask for clarification. I don't stand for it because I don't see myself any lesser than somebody that's got kids. And there's this belief, particularly when you said culturally, in my culture in India, kids represent prosperity. They represent success. So it means that you failed. So I now, I show up and say, maybe in a bit of defiance now, and say, look, I'm here, and this is who I am. And if you're going to start talking snide comments, you're going to be called out straight away. And that's how I've changed. And maybe people, that feel this way and don't want to talk about it, is because they feel A, they're alone, and B, this element of shame, and we have to remove that shame, that stigma, to move forward with this. And I think with the Diversity Council you spoke about, that's a great platform to do that on, to build awareness. Because I think knowledge beats ignorance, doesn't it? It starts to educate people.
Yeah, most definitely.
And with this, just so people know about this, Michael, can you if you don't mind, just expanding a bit more on that?
So, the company I work for is actually quite progressive in terms of its inclusion policies, but and I happen to be on a a training exercise with the Diversity Council of Australia. So you could look at those as being the peak body for diversity inclusion in Australia. Companies go to them to say, what's the latest thing? What do we need to be looking at for those ones that are a bit more proactive? So I had the occasion to bring up the fact that in this inclusion talk we had, there was a massive hole, which is the childless. And what was quite interesting is the Diversity Council went, shit, we've forgotten someone. So Australia's peak body didn't even have it. But because of who they are, now they're going, tell me. So I was able to write something for them, a blog post, and about the childless experience in the workplace. Now, it wasn't just my experience. It was the knowledge I've gathered from a lot of people, because I've immersed myself quite deeply into this community now and know quite a few people. But some context for it for today is that as a person who is middle-aged and a little bit above, I guess, some of the responsibilities that we have is to care for other people, care for our parents, because there's a belief that I've got much more time than anyone else, and so has my wife. So we take the primary care role of my parents. That is actually quite stressful. And so what does that mean in the workplace? So from an inclusion point of view, how is my workplace supporting me when I have to care for my parents? Now, when you're expanding your family, there's lots of options available to you. There's maternity leave and things like this. And yes, some organisations have carers leave, but it's not on the scale of maternity leave. So what I suggested to them was, why not look at how people are trying to maintain their families as well? Should that not be as equal than those expanding their family? So yeah, anyway, I'll rabble on forever, but in a nutshell, that's the diversity piece that I was able to get into. So I'm looking forward to working with them a bit more.
That's great. I mean, it's unbelievable that it was actually excluded when you raised it in the first place.
Oh, look, and it was a group of men. Let me tell you, it was a really interesting dynamic. So it was all a group of men because the actual talk was around gender equality, and the way that it was brought up was the conversation went over to children because, as I said, a group of men, they started to talk about, most of them had daughters, so they were talking about gender equality and that sort of thing, which is rightly so. But when we had question and answer at the end, I was able to say, I felt excluded from this conversation because of this. And I'm not trying to beat you around the head around it, but as an inclusive company, this is something, and as an inclusive peak body, this is something you guys need to be switched on to. So, yeah, it was quite interesting.
This is the thing about ignorance, that people need education to be made aware. It might not be, they don't intentionally do it. It's just that they're not thinking in that way.
That is exactly true, because every piece of feedback I got from the other men was around, oh, wow, I'm actually sorry. I'm sorry I brought my kids up. Oh, whoa, stop. No. It's okay. It's fine. I'm happy for you and I like listening to it. But I'm trying to just switch you onto the fact that inclusion can mean so much more.
It's this filtering from genuine ignorance to snide, snidey, like what Skambuza was talking about, where somebody's actually laughing at you. And I just thought about something, actually, is that the definition of aging without children actually includes men that have estranged children. So that in the definition. So I was just thinking, sometimes the people that laugh the most are the ones that fear that situation the most too. I was thinking, guys, when they're younger, they're worried about their hair. So I was one that didn't lose my hair, but there's some people lost their hair in their 20s and their 30s, and some people were laughing at them. But then as these people are getting towards the 40, 50, they're absolutely petrified that their hair's going, and they're more worried because they were thinking, thank God that didn't happen to me, and they could actually laugh at somebody. And this could happen to anyone, even the person that laughed at Scambozo, is that he might find himself, ostracized or estranged by his family, and he might find himself in the same situation, and he might not find that so funny after all. So that's one of the things to look at, is that sometimes people laugh because they're thinking, thank God that's not me. It gives them comfort a little bit. And we talked about wills as well. I never really thought about that, actually. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'll if I'm able to speak about the situation I'm in. So this is more of a practical side of things. So set the scene. My dad has dementia. My mum is Parkinson's, had a heart attack. So that's the situation at the moment. But when my dad first got dementia, or was first diagnosed with dementia, I should say, one of the good things that mum and dad did was actually do the power of attorney and the enduring guardianship. So here in New South Wales, Australia, you get two pieces of, I guess, legislation. No, anyway, can't think of the right term, but you'll get it. So there's a power of attorney. So the power of attorney gives you the power to let's say look after the finances and those sort of things for someone. But then there's also the enduring guardianship, which is, and I'll put it bluntly, it gives you the power to switch the machine off if you're on life support. That's the best way I can explain it. So we got those set up, and so in Australia we have something called superannuation. Russ will be very familiar with this. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but superannuation is, I guess, a private pension fund for those in the UK, and so there's many ways that you can do this. Now, my parents chose to do a self-managed super fund, which means that they create a company that then manages that, and then they manage the funds within that pension, or they have a third-party accountant do that as a way of maximising, I guess, the growth of your pension fund. Now, the problem came when we had to bring in the power of attorney, because what I didn't I didn't know, because who knows this stuff until you're actually in it, that a power of attorney that we got was only written for my parents, so for my dad and my mother, not for the entity that is the company that they are directors of, that manages their super fund. So from a practical point of view, it made it very complex and very expensive to actually deconstruct that, so that then I could actually manage their life for them. And so, yeah, I guess it's only pertinent for Australians, but it's something you need to consider when you're putting together a will, putting together a power of attorney. The more complex you make it, the more mistakes potentially could be made, the more laws you could break. And so, because as an example, I couldn't sign documents as their power of attorney on behalf of their company, because that's not what the power of attorney was about. It was about the individuals. So, yeah. So do your research. Do your research and find someone that has the knowledge to do this right. If that's so, who they are, I've got no idea. we would just happen to come across a really good financial advisor that actually worked in this field and was able to give us advice on what to do, which was to deconstruct their company. And because then one of the other things is that we had to get Dad into a care home, which is bloody expensive. So let's talk about in the region of 650,000 Australian dollars for his deposit for his care home. So it's a bit like, you know, you're buying the room and that money comes back to his estate when he passes away. But that's why we had to deconstruct his whole financial system, is to be able to get hold of some of that money to then use it for him. And so you can imagine how stressful that is, where you're trying to do the best for them, trying to navigate this system that's absolutely beyond my capacity. But at the same time, making sure that Dad's looked after in this, because it took nearly 2 years to do this. You know, so, yeah, so again, I'll rabble, but do your research.
Yeah, that's great advice there, Michael, because I don't think people think that, you know, that transparent or that thorough. They just think, oh, just a will. I can actually relate to that. I don't know if anyone else has really thought as deeply as Michael has there, because I certainly haven't. I don't know if anyone else has.
One of the things so when we bring this subject up, and so when you started to get the cogs moving for this, did you notice that, well, it's only middle-aged guys here. Well, Sukumbo is probably the youngest, but it's only middle-aged guys that are here, because a lot of our younger colleagues in the group, I will say, probably don't see this as important. But it is vitally important that right now you switch on to that, because it's at that 30s age where you can start to plan out for, you know, your twilight years, if you will.
Yeah. Another extension of that. One of the issues that can come up, and you talked about it before, Michael, that the childless people have more time, so they're able to look after the parents more. That is a reality right up until the time that we start to organise things like power of attorney, and all of a sudden the siblings have a bucket load of time on their hands to make sure that they get a say in that. And this might sound a little bit bitter. That's probably because it is. But yeah, we need to be aware that where we've been used and included up till now, this is when we may now get excluded, because all of a sudden the grandchildren have a greater priority over access to the grandparents and access to the inheritance. And things like this, and it becomes a real emotional and legal minefield. And it's best to go in being aware that this may happen. And there's a lot of families where it won't happen, where there's genuine fairness and equality and genuine concern about what's important here, which in this case is the parents. But there are also a lot of families where there's certain lack of emotional intelligence and a level of animosity around this particular subject, sadly. Sorry, that was my 2 cents worth. So,
no, thanks, Russ. I could keep going, Kevin, so you better jump in.
I'm gonna say, did you want to say something there, Robin? Because you come off mute. So
yeah, the families are funny, and they change over time. And certainly when legacy and some sort of monies may come down to them, then yeah, they do change. I think in the UK on pensions, it has changed a lot, and with power of attorney attorney. That's changed recently, but again, there was a very similar system and 2 levels of power of attorney there, and it was a bit of a legal process to get it, and it could take a time where quite often people's health had deteriorated, and there was that sort of limbo state where things needed to be done with the parent, but the adult child, didn't have the legal right to do it. Not that the state was particularly interested in taking over that either. So yes, it is. It can be really complex in later life, considering this, and certainly from my wife and I's point of view, we have had wills made up, and we do have something in there around power of attorney and nominated people, should they be around then. And there's a sort of, well, that's A, but there's a B list as well, the subs bench, just in case, and those people have to be informed as well. And I don't know, maybe we did that 5 years ago, they may have changed their minds, may have fallen out, who knows. So it is a complex area in that. And talking about care, quite often the saying is women do the care. Majority of care is by women. In the UK, the Carers Association found out a couple of years ago about 42% of care was by men and 58 by women. So it's a lot closer than that. And there's also a problem with the word care, because a lot of people struggle with that. They don't see it as caring for a parent or caring for a partner, but as just part of the package of being in that relationship. So they struggle on those sort of surveys to say, well, I am looking after my mum or my dad or my spouse, but I don't see myself as a carer because I don't wear a uniform. I'm not delivering medicines. So there's also another thing about men tend to be a bit more functional, and I think do a sort of cost benefit analysis, saying, actually, what can I do here with this person? What are my skills? Well, I can't do much, but I can buy it in. And that's what men tend to do. So it's care by provision, as opposed to care by hands-on stuff. So something very strong about that. Actually, men do care, and that it's missing a lot from statistics and from narratives in the press and elsewhere as well. Certainly, I cared for my mother when she was dying, and so I'm going to list the dead now. I'm sorry about this. my brother as well, and my sister not my sister. My brother as well. Me and my brother did it because my other brother, because I come from a big family as well. So there's lots of brothers and sisters, and we did it because we were available. And I think quite often when it comes to care, it's who's available when. So I'll get off this now. So let somebody else speak.
Thank you, Robin. I think these are really relevant points, and hopefully, from what I get, the message from this is for men, not just middle-aged men like us, but men in their 30s, when we all felt that there's a possibility of us actually being without children, to start looking into this more thoroughly and looking at it, the ins and outs, like we just explained. So I think it's been a very, very relevant thing to talk about.
Yeah, just further on Robin's comment about men, by provision. That's what I do, pretty much. Is I'm looking for what services are available, what can we get, how much, what sort of finances have they got that we can afford this sort of thing. Whereas my wife, on the other hand, she because I must admit, we're a pretty good team, and Mum needs a lot of attention right now. And so she will go and do the care part of it, if you will. But yeah, I totally get what Robin means, but by provision, and that should be seen as caring, because it's not easy.
And it can be better to do that than struggle trying to do the hands-on stuff, which isn't a benefit for you or for the person receiving the care.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we should introduce that Guy Stoker's question, which I think is. So I'm going to preface this by saying that there's a trigger warning right now. So we could be talking about we will be talking about end of life strategies, and you can read into that. You can read into those words as you will, but just know that there's a trigger warning here. So one of the Clanner brothers brought up that, and he's quite happy for us to quote him, to say that once his parents and his wife goes, that he believes he may as well follow them. And it's not a hard thing for me to talk about, because my wife and I have talked about this. Because we have this lived experience with my parents. So my dad, as I said, has dementia. We were able to get him into a care home, and a good one. So we're happy about that. And so then there's my mother, who's a bit more stubborn and a bit more old school, a war baby, but she needs a lot of attention, because her mental faculties have got to a point now where she just can't be asked doing anything. So she can still cook for herself. She can still, maintain her own hygiene, and wants to live in her own home. But to ring a doctor, could you ring the doctor for me? It's that sort of stuff. The stuff that she needs to do to maintain her life, she just can't be asked doing. So what would happen is she'd just sit on the seat and just probably watch TV and wait to die. But she has me, she has my brother, she has my wife, and between the three of us, we're managing all the things that need to happen. But what it really does for my wife and I, it says, who's going to do that for us? So because, and this is what I want to try and instill in the younger people, is that, right now you're full of beans. You're switched on, you know everything, and boom, the world's my oyster. But I've watched my mother particularly was quite a formidable woman. She's not that anymore. She's far from that. Can't even ring up a doctor. Can't see the point. Let's say she'll ring up and go, I'm not feeling very well. Okay, Mum, what's wrong? Let's work through this. Help me understand what's wrong. Oh, I don't know. So I can make choices for her. But as an example, my brother took her to the hospital yesterday because she wasn't feeling very well. So we were able to do that. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time, and it don't work. So my wife and I go, well, who's going to do this for us? Because our mental faculty will decline. It will decline. And there is no one to look after us. So from a dying with dignity point of view, that's where we look at that and say, well, if I can't look after myself, let's just say the doctor says, Michael, I think you've got dementia. Our belief is that we should choose when we leave this earth with dignity, because there's going to be no one overseeing my care. As an example of this, when Mum had a heart attack and we had to get her into a care home just to tide us over so we could redo her bathroom that was more walker friendly. It turns out that, and Russ might be able to help me out here, but she had a fluid buildup around her heart after the heart attack. Now, the care home, they just went, and it was a really nice place, don't get me wrong, But the staff in there, oh no, you're okay. You just go to sleep. She goes, every time I lie down, I can't breathe. But no one switched on to that. No one. And it wasn't until, we were able to intervene and go, hey, something's wrong here. What's going on? So it's these situations that really, really reinforce into us that we should have a choice when we leave this earth. And I know that's a difficult subject for some. I know that in many different ways, but we firmly believe that we should have that right because we will have no one to oversee us. We did a podcast on this, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the woman's name, but the statement was really strong, and she said, "I am no one's priority," and it's true. My parents are my priority right now, but I've got no. And if my wife and I decline at the same rate, or one passes before the other, we will be no one's priority. So I believe it's important for us to have that choice. Does that make sense?
Yes,
it does. It does. I'm here as a young man, and when we were planning this, I was thinking to myself, what does the young man need in this? And this, I mean, this is for all people. But I thought to myself, and I've been thinking about this for quite a while, because when I got married, my mother-in-law just fell ill, Parkinson's disease, from that time up to this time, and her health is just going down. And this has got me thinking every day to say, okay, the son-in-law is here, my wife's sisters are there, the brothers are there, but what about me? So each time I go to visit her, this just rings and says, okay, what am I doing in order to plan for that time? So this is a very crucial subject. It's not for the midlifers. It's not for those who are in their 60s. It's even for the 30s, those who don't have children. Maybe you may not have them at all. So planning for this is very important. And basically, this is the reason why maybe some people are quick to say, adopt. And maybe they don't even understand also the dynamics that come with that as well. But they will be afraid of who is going to take care of you when you're old. So when you're old, to prevent that from happening, when you're old, just adopt. Just adopt. So that will be the response that will be coming from them each time when they think about aging without children. But I think there are better ways to go around that besides adoption. Adoption is a good thing, but you also need to be prepared to follow up the issues that come with it. And in my country here, it is some painful process because they need to check this and check that and check this and check that and check this and check this. It's so tiresome that by the time you get the child, you're already tired. You will feel that I really don't have a child. So I'm thinking to myself, if at all there is any young person that's listening, I'm one of them. This is very, very important to plan about aging without children, because at that time, all strength and power and vigor will be gone and you won't be able to do anything. So what is the fallback plan, depending on the part of the world that you are in? What is it that will be the fallback plan? That is very crucial. That's very important. Thank you.
Can I just jump in, which Michael said about living, dying with dignity? And I think there's something about living with dignity in later life as well, and putting support in if you can there. And I think in this country, then there's probably people already looking at how we can marketize that, and so that we can provide a service that's so much where we do that for you. I'm sure that's going to come through. How much I trust them is a different matter, because it tends to be in this country, there's a great idea, oh great, there's a market, will come in and sort it out, and then the market comes and it fills its boots, and then there's a bit of, actually, yeah, it wasn't what they said, and then there's regulation sort of catches. But I think that might be something. But yeah, dignity in later life and what that would look like and how you can plan for that. So I think I'm going to have to go back on these wills now, because I'm thinking there's a lot of stuff in there. I better check up on it. But I'm sure we've got a criteria of, actually, if I can't do this, if I can't use a toilet myself, if I can't read, if I can't interact, if I can't move, then these are factors that actually a DNR, do not resuscitate, comes in for us. And that's sort of written in. And hopefully that will get transferred through to whatever caring situation we're in at that point. I was very aware. One of my sisters died earlier this year, and she had 2 daughters, and they were brilliant in caring for her. And a couple of weeks before she died, she knew she was terminally ill, and went to have a chat, and also to relieve them so they could go off and do stuff. So I went to stay with her for a couple of hours, and she said to me, "I'm glad I'm not the last one of our big family." And that stuck with me, actually, to be the last one, because I'm one of the younger ones. That might be one of my duties, to see everybody else off the world.
Wow. Sorry, were you going to say, Russ?
And it's not a responsibility that we actually get prepared for. I'm the youngest, not only of my siblings but my cousins, so I'm the baby. And by the time we get there, we're going to have watched everyone else. Supposedly watched everyone else move on. And another thing that's going to, or could bring in for us, is a amount of dissociation or callousness about how we approach that. And I think we need to be cautious that we don't apply that to ourselves, a lack of concern or care because we've watched everyone else move on, and we're fatigued and tired from it. And so when we think about our own care later on, we don't have the level of motivation, I suppose, to look after ourselves, because it's tiring. It's to watch. My wife's grandmother died a week and a bit ago now, and that was another one on top of the amount. And as you get older, you watch more of your loved ones die, and we need to be cognizant of the ability to project enough concern onto ourselves to realize this is a priority and something we have to do. Sorry, that got a bit airy-fairy there, but I think that's important. That's self-care.
No, there's some really good points there. As to it's jogged me, because from all of you, I haven't myself thought as thoroughly as I could have done, and I will now be revisiting my wills and looking at things in a more practical way. I think we talked a little bit about the personal impact of this, and we talked about exclusion, but there is a sense and a real fear of isolation and loneliness as you get older. And maybe is that what stops us from wanting to go there and actually start looking into this? And because of the pain, it's too scary. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel that way.
I would say I think it's just not been exposed to it. I think what we're doing today is going to be really thought-provoking for some people. You know, my wife and I were forced into thinking this way because, of course, mum and dad. But yeah, if I think back, say, 20 years, I'm just enjoying life. You know, it's just, this is just great. And so didn't even give it a thought, but it's just really forced me with mum and dad. And I think this is what we need. We need to keep this conversation going so that we can perhaps get people switched on to that, to the idea of friends. So my mum and dad have no friends, and you think to yourself, how does that happen? Of course, I know because I'm their son and I've watched their life, and I know why it's been that way. But the scary thing is that as a childless person, you have the potential to end up that way. Because, of course, you isolate yourself from the world anyway as your way of coping with what's, you know, of course, I'm preaching to the converted here, but you isolate yourself as a bit of a coping mechanism. You get disassociated with many people around you in life because of that, and by their attitude. So there is a big danger that we could end up just like my mum and dad with no friends. Now, those friends could have been another layer of care. You know, so they could be the ones that say, "Oh, let's get a few girls together and pre-COVID and go somewhere and have a cup of tea, or go and have a picnic in the park, or something like that." Just another layer of care that gets you out of the home. You know, and we all know that if you sit around for too long, depression, will probably set in. So these things help as well. And so my wife's probably sick to death of me saying we need to build our circle of friends. We need to build our circle of friends, because although they will not be a primary caregiver, they will be a level of care for us as we age, as we can be for them. So, and I can see where, like, the AWOC in the UK, Aging Without Children, is trying to, that group is trying to, you know, do that, create that community. And so there's a small group of Aussies actually down here that are looking at creating a shall we say, a national body for the childless, being a voice for the childless. And one of those things will be that we, you know, about building community, because it's not just about now, it's about the future. And we can all play a role in the support of that living with dignity, Robin. You know, we can all help each other, both feed into that and receive from it.
No, that's a good point, and it goes back about mindset as well here, because the barrier of us actually maintaining our circle of friends comes from sometimes us having to hide our shame and isolating that. So it's about us changing our mindset to be able to accept and go forward and engage with our friends, so that we stay a part of that, because otherwise the opposite happens. We're alone. And I think that it's a good point, not just to the converted, but for maybe people who are listening in that are thinking that way, that think that I feel isolated and I'm alone. Well, you're not alone, because we've all felt that way. So it's a good point to raise, and particularly about on changing that mindset. And one of the things I was just thinking of is that we've talked about men that have partners here. some men don't have partners, and you can imagine how that feels. To actually, you know, like yourself, Michael, I've got my wife. We can talk about these things, but who do you talk to if you are isolated? You feel shame, and you know you feel alone. And this is where by starting this discussion with the Facebook group, I'd encourage people to come forward if they want to actually engage, if they want to, you know, through the forum with us, because they'll get support, and you know, we'll be more than happy to provide that and provide some advice and guidance on that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, please, Robert, go ahead.
Sorry, I think particularly as men and men aging, women tend to have a larger circle of social network of friends, and they tend to keep them across the life course. Men tend to be around work, and when they exit work, for quite a lot of men, that's a big issue with their social network. And what happens then, particularly if there's no partners, how do they manage? Because quite often solo living people, single people will say, I have to try harder than somebody who's got a partner to communicate. Now, there's a couple of great organizations, one from Australia, Men's Sheds, that's gone global, and also one in the UK, I'm not quite sure if that's gone international, called Empower. But both those, well, certainly Men's Sheds, obviously about men, but I think aiming towards older men, but great to go and just be, and their big thing is shoulder to shoulder. And just to be and share. And Empower started off in the northeast of this country in a residency, and they were wondering why the men wouldn't come to any social event. And that was because most of the social event was run by women and occupied by women. And somebody had the bright idea, well, let's get some hens and, you know, grew them from eggs. And the men came in them because they could do something. They built the hatches, and also they started taking them into schools. They were used in dementia residences for art and stuff like that. And there's something about men and doing things. And I think we're conditioned from that from an early age to suppress our emotions, but to go out and do something. And maybe that's a way of looking at things in later life. Of what can I do? And look around, and certainly in Manchester and quite a few cities, there are quite a few local organisations that do pick up on that. But you might have to take that first step. And I'm just going to go to the LGBTQIA community, because there's a lot of work around there about being isolated in later life. You know, if you go into a residency, of maybe going back into the closet because it's a heterosexual environment and you don't want to be discriminated against. But for men, for that community, in Manchester, there was an older person's group set up specifically by Aging UK, where they met twice a week, had a coffee and a brew, but also planned stuff together. And did that. And the two of the guys I spoke to in my research, that was a lifesaver for one of them. His partner had died. He was depressed. He was thinking of suicide, but got introduced to this group, and just having that connection for a few hours a week made a big difference to him. And he then got a part-time job. He was going out and doing lots of things, from a guy who said, sometimes I just catch the bus so I could hear people's voices. To do that. So there's something around that, and that maybe is one of the guys I spoke to. He said, you know, I'm getting on now. You know, I'm no longer invincible. And I think that says so much. It says so much about how society views us, and also how we view how we should be in society. And in later life, that's a big challenge to that ideal. But maybe also in later life, it gives us the opportunity to say, actually, I'm a bit vulnerable here. And that's going to be more acceptable than if you're 21. But also, if we make that now, it's going to make it easier for the generations coming through to be vulnerable and to admit that. So I'll stop. I'll get off the soapbox now.
It's I think now might be a great opportunity to leverage the lived experience of isolation that has happened over the last 18 months. I think people will have experienced a part of life that previously they haven't, or it's magnified what they're already going through. And I wonder if there's some way to, if we can draw something good out of what we've been through, can we somehow look at that experience? And I'm sure there's going to be a body of research out there about isolation, and somehow apply that to this particular environment, especially for those, as you said, Robin, that are solo living, which I am, and working from home has just been great. My dog loves it. No one else does. But yeah, it's an opportunity that we would not have seen otherwise, I wonder. Anyway, yeah, I'll get off mine now too.
Sorry, can I just come in again? Sorry, on social isolation. Some of the big surveys are great about that, national survey stuff, but unfortunately, because people without children aren't seen as a group, quite often they're missed from those. So loneliness and our social isolation surveys, and I think most countries have done them, and they're there. But again, there's this drive for the family. And what they're looking at is the family, and they don't recognize people aging without children. It's a real, because you're not a statistic, you're not measured, you don't exist. I'm afraid that's come through really bigly in this. Bigly? I've turned into Donald Trump. It's a bigly matter. It's a big matter. Sorry, it's not a laughing matter. So I've lost my own thread now. That's great, isn't it? So yes, because you're not counted, we're not measured, and if you're not measured, you're not managed. And again, with measurement, management, money, 3 M's all go together in government and institutions like that. And it's a thing we're trying to do here. And in a lot of countries, I'm just going to go back on the stats, they don't know how many childless men there are accurately compared to how many childless women. Because when birth is registered, the mother's fertility history is taken, but not the father's, with the exception, I think, of Norway and Sweden. And so every country will say there's, in the UK, it's just under 20% of women are childless. But there's no equivalent accurate measurement of childless men, but it's probably around about 25%. And that goes for all countries. There's probably more childless men than childless women. And that's usually a shocker for most people because they associate motherhood, but also childlessness with women, but not with men. Men, 2 myths, they can reproduce all their lives and they're not bothered. Both false, but both very, very common. I am getting off soapbox again. I'm getting dizzy.
There's some great comments there, and I echo your thoughts about vulnerability there, Robin. I think that as men, we've got to swallow our pride, and vulnerability we have got this competitiveness that I think vulnerability will actually help remove if people really see the actual impact of this. And I do think pride is a big thing in all of this. So I'm just looking at the time. I think we've covered a lot of points here. So before we go, I think the best thing to do is to go around, each of you, just for your final thoughts, any final words on the matter before we conclude. So I'll start with you were first on, Robin. Well, you were dizzy, but I have to get you back on that soapbox again.
Yeah, I was thinking, he's not going to come to me first. But he is. You're not alone. Okay. There are things out there. And if there isn't, then perhaps through this, you can pick up ideas from elsewhere. No idea is so big it can't be copied, is what Snoopy said, I think, way back when. And to transfer that across to your situation and maybe do that, look around, plan. And, we all know how this ends. And we can choose to mitigate that ending if we want to.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Russ.
I think what's come out of this exercise this morning for me is the how manifold this subject is, how deep it can be. Two things that really stand out for me are, as Scum said earlier, start looking at this when you're younger. Start planning for it. I'm 52 now, and whilst I still have time to do this, I'm in an age group now where we start to get unwell more often, and of course I don't look after myself, as a lot of people in my boat do. So we need to be prepared for what may come out of that. And moving on from that was something that Michael said about end of life by choice. Is something which, I mean, we've gone through these exercises in the last 5 years or so in Australia to legislate this, and New South Wales are going through it right now about end of life planning and assisted dying technologies, that sort of thing. And it's a really valid and relevant thought that it never even occurred to me, but it's something about dignity that we need to look at and ensure that we can maintain that for ourselves. And because we are childless, we're the ones that have to maintain that for ourselves. We're the ones that have to take that on board and move forward with it. That's me done.
Okay, thanks, Russ. Scumbozo.
Okay, I was muted. Also, I was speaking when I was muted. Okay. This has been a great learning experience for me because I've been seated with the elders and they've been speaking. And as a young man, I learned a lot because sharing from your well of wisdom, different experiences, being in a childless marriage and not being in a childless marriage, just being alone, and the experiences that you've shared have been really breathtaking, and they are preparing a young man like me to say, okay, this is the time to start. I don't have to wait later on, but I have to start now. And if you are there and you are like me and you are young, we don't know. Life is very uncertain, and it's very important to plan. And the time for planning is not in the future, it is now. And so let's begin to do those things. And for my friends that don't have partners, I'm not in that experience per se, but I feel it must be heavy because I know the isolation that I have with a partner. how much more if you don't have one? It should be even deeper. And my heart goes towards you, and I extend my love, and you receive a warm hug from the African continent. And I'm saying, yes, you are very important. You are valuable. You are not any less. You are still an important element, an important person in this life. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you, Skumbozo. Some lovely words there. Michael.
I had to gather myself there a bit because what Skumbozo said, beautiful, absolutely. And he's right. So, as you can probably gather from the chat today, that this is something I'm quite passionate about. But the discussions also brought up the idea about, our childless men who are single. And I have to admit to not being tuned into that. So I'm going to put my thoughts around what can we do in the Clan of Brothers to perhaps connect to more of our childless single men together. So not quite sure what that is yet, but let's get some thought around that. Look, I'm more than happy to chat with anyone who wants to take this offline and ask my advice of what my experience has been. I'm sure don't have enough answers, but more than happy to do that. And I just want to say thanks, guys, for being here. Thanks, Kevin, for putting this all together. And I've just seen a comment by Donnie saying that he would like to be part of a discussion on loneliness. So maybe that's our next one.
Could may well be. Definitely. Now, thanks, guys. For my part is this has been a discussion that I've learned a lot from. And to be honest, it's not something I've given a lot of thought to. And it's really jarred me. And after this call, I will be doing some real searching and some thorough thinking as well, not just being dismissive about it. And one of the things that did come up is about inclusion is that Robin said about the LGBT plus as well, because that's another area that has, will feel the same about this situation about aging without children. And it's something that I echo what you said, Michael, about what we could do in the Clan of Brothers to include that, because we all are brothers in this group, so everyone is included. But it's been a fantastic discussion. I feel quite shaky actually, and I can feel emotion building, because whenever we talk about childlessness, obviously there's a deep connection in all of us that never goes away, and it just reminds us, as to what we experienced and how we can share that experience for other people to benefit from that. So thank you for everyone else that's been listening. A copy of this will be put onto the YouTube channel for the Clan of Brothers. Please come forward in the Facebook group if you've got any questions, or post stories and share experiences other than what we've shared today, or what you think from what we shared, because everything is valuable. That's one thing to say, is that everybody's story is valuable. Don't think that your story is not important. Everyone's story is important, because everyone has a story, and that's something I think that is really needs to be said. Guys, fantastic. Again, thank you very much, Robin, Russ, Skumbozo, and Michael. Thanks everyone for listening, and we've already talked about what our next subject will be, so it's something we will set up around this time of November, so look out for that. Righto.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Night.
See you guys.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.